is a webinar that's we're co-presenting, or actually presenting is Orchid Advisor. We have Alexis and hopefully Phil at the end here to go over the regulatory changes and what's happened for 2017. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Alexis.
For our FFL Biz Hub.com product. Sam, are you there?
Yes, I am. You cut out there for a second, but you're back on.
Oh, good. Okay. Phil, my colleague, who will hopefully be joining us shortly once his technical difficulties are resolved, is the Executive Director for Orchid Advisor's manufacturing practice, and he is a licensed attorney. To kick this off, we are going to take a minute to focus on some of the federal and state regulatory sort of changes and updates that occurred in 2017, as well as recommend some actions that you take if you haven't done so already regarding these changes. And we're just going to jump right in here quickly. Specifically, there are some changes to transactional activity with the 4473 and NYX. In January of this year, ATF required the new Form 4473, revised in October of 2016, to be utilized. In May, ATF finally, hooray, released an updated E4473 application. So that is the application that is actually owned and issued by the ATF. It was finally updated to align with the revised Form 4473, as well as ATF posted the Spanish Form 4473 for comment during the May month. And although comments on the Spanish Form 4473, all comments were due in August, they still have not issued that final 4473 in Spanish. So the actions from this really are to verify that you're using the correct Form 4473. Any previous additions are considered obsolete and are no longer valid for transactions after that implementation date. If you're using an electronic software, always assure that the system is completely updated and ready to go if you're using an E4473 with that system. Not all providers can offer you that statement to say yes as soon as it's available, it's been updated. But the Epicor's FFL Compliance Manager was immediately ready to go and, in fact, just automatically switched over to the new form. So back in January. So if you are using Epicor's FFL Compliance Manager, I can certainly confirm that their software was one of the softwares that was ready to go and just switched you right over, no action required. Because there were some changes to the verbiage on the forms, assure that your sales staff is aware and properly trained. Again, if you've got electronic software and it is something that they're walking through, typically they're going to notice the differences in the form sometimes because the flow is a little different. Maybe the numbers are a little different. However, do take the time to be sure your team knows what those changes were and how they could impact your specific business operations. The other consideration is that although there is no new version of ATF Form 4473 currently available in Spanish, you cannot use the old 4473 available in Spanish. So at this time, 4473 only available in English, and that is the only document that you should be transacting with. Another update that came from the ATF this year was ATF Procedure 2017-1. Was issued at the end of July and specifically focused on clarifying the requirements around facilitation of private party transfers. So when a customer owns a firearm and they bring it into your business to facilitate them selling that to another person. In this document, they broke it down based upon the responses that you were given from your background check agency. If customer, potential seller, and potential buyer. If the buyer completes a 4473 and is immediately given a proceed to that background check, you are required to enter the firearm as acquired from the seller and dispose to the buyer who completed the 4473. But you do have to indicate that it is facilitation of a private party transfer in question 32 of ATF Form 4473. Again, you complete the 4473 as usual. All of the same transactional standards apply. You just have to indicate that you are conducting that to facilitate a private party transfer. If you get a denied or canceled response, here are part of the information that is very relevant. If the private party seller has not relinquished possession of the firearm, so in other words, they have not turned that firearm over to you at your FFL premises, they are still there, they still have the firearm in their possession, then that seller may leave with the firearm, and you are not required to record that as an acquisition into your A&D book. However, the 4473 that the potential buyer completed, including information on the background check, etc., you do have to maintain that document as you would any other denied or canceled 4473. However, you would indicate on question 32 that it was to facilitate a private party transfer. Thus, there is not necessarily a corresponding entry into your acquisition for the firearm. If the private party seller leaves the firearm in the exclusive possession of your business at your business premise, they walk out the front door, then you have to acquire the firearm into your A&D book. And if that seller, because the sale, again, was canceled or denied, in order to return the firearm to that party who was originally trying to sell the firearm, they must complete a 4473, including a background check. You must dispose of the firearm in the A&D book. And the important thing to remember here is you must complete the 4473 as well as the disposition process, if you will, in compliance with all of the normal activities that you would take when selling a new or used firearm. Just because they were the original owner, if you will, once that possession is relinquished to your FFL, then they must reacquire it just like any new sale. If you are given a delay without a denial, the private party seller may leave your premises with the firearm if he or she has not relinquished possession. So if they're standing there, you submit it to NYX or your state agency, and instantly you're getting a delay with no additional response, the seller may walk out the door with that firearm. However, in order to complete the transfer of the firearm to the potential buyer, they have to return to your business premises, and then at which time you would take the steps necessary given whichever response you get, a proceed later or no response within 3 days, and go through that process. However, if you allow the customer, right, so the pending seller, it is at your discretion, it is not required. However, if at your discretion you advise the customer, yes, we will take possession of this firearm pending a response, then you must acquire the firearm into your acquisition and disposition book. However, the seller does not have to return to your business premise in order to complete the transfer, just the potential buyer at that point. If the private parties do not return to complete the transfer, you must retain the 4473s in accordance with all ATF standards, which are in section 478.129B. The document doesn't speak to necessarily your requirements as far as possession and returning the item, etc. This strictly speaks to the entries into your acquisition and disposition book and your record retention. If you get a delay with a subsequent denial, again, if the seller has not relinquished the possession of the firearm, he or she may leave your premise, right? And you do not have to enter the acquisition into the A&D book. In other words, you never had possession of the firearm. The sale was denied. The original owner, the seller, is allowed to leave with their firearm. However, if the firearm is left in the exclusive possession of your FFL at your business premise, then you do have to acquire the firearm into your acquisition and disposition record. You have to complete the 4473 for return, including the associated background check and all necessary waiting periods. And then when the seller actually takes possession of the firearm, you must dispose of it in the A&D book. And again, you have to get a proceed or no response within 3 business days, and all appropriate waiting periods must be observed. Procedure 2017-1 also goes further to address handguns and trigger locking devices or safety device. If the seller does not relinquish control of the handgun, you must provide them with the associated trigger lock or locking device, one for each item that he or she will be transferring. In addition to that, you must report all multiple dispositions, 2 or more pistols or revolvers acquired in 5 consecutive business days, whether it's to the original intended seller or to the buyer. They are all of the transactions are subject to multiple disposition reporting. Same thing with long guns. You must report all multiple dispositions acquired in 5 consecutive business days to either the seller or the buyer. So again, if for whatever reason the transaction was not completed to the intended buyer and you return them to the seller via the 4473 process, those must be accounted for as multiple sales and reported accordingly if necessary. You also, as the FFL, must comply with all applicable state and local laws. So private party transfers facilitated by an FFL are not exempt from any sort of regulations for transfer or possession. If there are any waiting periods that must be observed, if there are any necessary licenses or permits, you must comply with all of those regulations, including additional forms or documents, all of that notification of transfer. It is all subject to the same requirements as any other transfer to a non-licensee. You must comply as well with all interstate controls and age requirements of the Gun Control Act. So you may not facilitate a private party transfer of a firearm unless it meets those standards. So 18 for a long gun, 21 years of age for a handgun or any other weapon, and both states' requirements for transfer to a resident of another state must be adhered. So again, just because it's a private party transfer, it's not excluded from any of your normal over-the-counter sales requirements. Recommended actions that we have from this is to really develop policies and procedures for private party transfers. Let your employees know what your expectations are and how that process will flow through your business environment. How will they enter those into software? What sort of notes are going to be required around that? And let your team know when you consider your business to have been in possession of a firearm. You know, will a customer be allowed to leave a firearm in your possession? Sort of all of those things, go ahead and put those into some documents, communicate that with your team, as well as, if necessary, customers attempting to complete a private party transfer at your business so they know what they can expect. And then train your staff. Assure that all of your counter sales staff is aware of your compliance standards, you know, what your threshold has been set within your organization and how they will accomplish that, you know, when they will acquire and dispose, when to require an ATF Form 4473, including return to the original intended seller, you know, how to report multiple sales and assure that they're tracked within your system, how that they're aware that all waiting periods do apply, how they're going to go through complying with state and local regulations, and the requirements for handgun locking devices and trigger locks. This is something that typically gets overlooked. A lot of dealers that deal in new firearms only typically don't have abundance of trigger locks laying around. So to that end, you may also need to consider if there is a necessary fee associated with this type of transacting, and the handgun locking devices or trigger locks to be included in that fee so that it is not an expense, an unexpected expense, and to be sure, again, that you have them on premise for giving to customers. Another great announcement is that FBI NYX has announced enhanced customer service. The important thing to note with this is they're available Monday through Thursday from noon Eastern time to 5 p.m. Eastern time, okay, Monday through Thursday. They are still absolutely closed on the weekends. The wonderful thing that they have announced, though, is that there is a form now available on their website called the Ask the FBI NYX for Assistance form. The form is available 24/7, and once you submit that, it puts it into a queue, if you will, for a response. Now then, they will certainly respond during their business hours. However, their customer service phone hours are not necessarily the business hours for responding to requests for assistance submitted. And I really think this speaks volumes to sort of where the industry is headed. You know, everybody's looking for these electronic queues and systems to really facilitate their processes. So definitely bookmark the website, know where the form is, don't try to look for it later, and assure that your counter staff is aware of the extended hours as well as the closures. And the reason I say be sure they know the closures, if your counter staff is got an issue and they're calling on Saturday or Sunday, they're not getting anywhere and they're just wasting their time and likely increasing their frustration. So it's important that they understand the hours that someone is available to assist them. ATF also issued in 2017 some great information around disaster preparedness, and we've sort of coupled that with some sort of recommendations from Orchid advisors. This year, ATF actually issued 3 special advisories to federal firearms licensees, as well as a couple of them included information for federal explosive licensees. And they were all around the hurricanes that happened, Harvey, Irma, and Maria. However, the information in these is absolutely critical, regardless of where you are in the U.S., regardless of what sort of potential disaster could be. It's critical. And the one thing that the document really said over and over was that all FFLs should have a disaster preparedness plan. You know, essentially, it is your responsibility to assure that as a licensee, that you're safeguarding your business by protecting any explosives, so ammunition and firearms, as well as your required records. You know, your records must be maintained for 20 years or the life of your FFL, depending on the type of license you have. And there is, you know, sort of no exception in there because a disaster occurred. So it is your responsibility as a licensee to assure you're doing what it takes to safeguard the integrity of those. They also went further to say that if you need to remove firearms or ammunition from your business premises, you know, executed Forms 4473 and multiple disposition reports, as well as your acquisition and disposition records, to reach out to your local field office for potentially even verbal approval to authorize those. And again, this is great if you know a disaster is coming, you know, to say, hey, this is going to happen, I need to reach out, but that's hardly ever the case. So around that, we have some recommendations. For one, utilize every process and system that is available to you that gives you the peace of mind and the risk level that your business finds tolerable and comfortable to work within. I recommend you look carefully and review the 3 disaster preparation and special advisories, as well as the disaster preparations for federal firearms licensee publication that the ATF has issued. And consider what types of disaster could potentially happen at your business, fire, theft or loss, a flood or a hurricane. And it's important to think water damage, right? Floods and hurricanes aren't the only way water gets into your business. To consider those, as well as extended power outages. What do you do? Consider the likelihood of disaster. And to look at that, you can look at weather patterns for your area, as well as the crime reports. What are your potential theft loss risks? And to create plans then, including, and this gets much, much, much more difficult, dare I say, the less technologically integrated your processes are. And so creating your plans can be monumental or much more minuscule, if you will, depending on the technology you have integrated. And say, for example, there are so many software systems that do wonderful things. However, if they don't allow you access to those records, potentially off-site or other locations, that can be very difficult. So to that end, know exactly how and where you can access your records. What are you going to do? Do you need to load up all of those hard files and truck them with you if you're in an evacuation scenario? And is that even potentially an option? How will you know where your records are located in your building? Where are those files? How will you contact your employees post-disaster? Let them know potentially that something has happened, So keep a call tree. Keep a log of where your documents are stored. Create a disaster management plan. Know how to contact your alarm company, right? Who are you going to contact and when? Have a call schedule. This is one thing that I recommend highly is to let your employees know that way before any disaster potentially occurs that that the morning following at 8 a.m. you're going to have a conference call and here's all of the call-in information, right? So that everyone knows, regardless of where they are, whether they have cell phone service or not, etc., that this is the venue in which you can all will work to do what it takes to be on the line to communicate with each other, as well as have a post-disaster plan. Know what repair companies and contacts you would like to utilize, as well as their contact information, and insurance policy information and contacts for those. Again, if you have a strictly paper system, this can be a monumental task. If you utilize some of the technological advances available, and I can speak to FFLCM because I know it so well. We are the partner on that. But FFLCM and like systems essentially allow you to access all of your A&D records off-site. If you are utilizing the E4473 complete with digital signature capture, if any of your records are lost or destroyed after you've printed those out, you do have an opportunity to reprint them at that time. Because one of the things is any records that are lost or destroyed, typically ATF is going to ask you to do whatever it takes to recreate them to the best of your ability. There is a lot to be said for the peace of mind of knowing that it doesn't matter where you are or what has happened to those files printed out on site, that with a system like FFLCM, you can just access them anywhere with internet service and print them out and reestablish those as part of your post-disaster recovery. Looking briefly to export control reform, the State Department has completed the necessary revisions to the ITAR. So the State Department has taken care of their piece of that. However, the Commerce Department has not completed the revisions to the Export Administration Regulations, the EAR, that are required in order to receive the items being moved from the ITAR to the EAR. And because of that, no immediate actions are recommended at this time. It's suggested that if changes to import could impact your business, that you do continue to monitor it. But for most retailers, this is not something you'd feel, but definitely manufacturers are imported, sort of stay tuned for more information. There are some state legislative and regulatory updates that happened in 2017. And let me ask Phil, are you available? Hello?
I haven't seen, Alexis, I don't think we're going to be able to get Phil.
No problem. No problem. So we're just going to brush on these briefly. Again, California did pass some Proposition 63. It went into effect in 2017. There are other pieces of it that continue to roll out through 2019. A lot of these are pending litigation now. There are new assault weapon regulations, as well as large capacity magazine regulations. Iowa issued HF 517 that legalized the possession of short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns. It further went to clarify what that information meant and exactly what residents were entitled to possess. Massachusetts enacted a bump stock ban. In Maine, the requirements for dealers to make and maintain separate copies of 4473s were removed. So again, moving towards more technology, trying to keep up. Although this isn't necessarily a regulation that passed, in Minnesota, ATF did announce that the Minnesota handgun carry permit with expiration dates after 8/1 of 2019 qualified for NYX exemption, so updates the permanent Brady chart. And in Texas, simply in alignment to say that NFA items match essentially the federal regulations regarding whatever sort of registration, et cetera, because suppressors previously were included in that, and they stated that suppressors were required to be registered with the ATF. However, should the Hearing Protection Act pass, essentially it would make suppressor possession unable to be compliantly done in Texas because it would still require their registration. And with the potential passage of the Hearing Protection Act, that would no longer be required. So it just aligned the federal with the state laws. And in Washington, Washington State, there is now a reporting requirement for all denied firearm transfers involving prohibited persons. So anytime a firearm is denied to be transferred, it must be reported to the state. In addition to that, there are tons of pending regulations. Obviously, completely understanding how all of these things could impact your over-the-counter sales can be very difficult. There are services and different various portals that make determining your over-counter sales options much, much easier. So in addition, again, it's that technology integration. It really helps. So with that, a part of FFL Biz Hub is one of these, you just kind of select the firearm types and it will output a yes, is it allowed, or no, isn't. And that's available within our FFLBizHub.com application. And that brings it to a close. Sam, I turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. I know at the end, Alexis, I think there were a couple slides that listed some helpful links that we have. We will make this presentation available if anybody would like it. They can email me at skirkland, skirkland at epicor.com, and let me know. We can definitely share this with you. If there are any questions, we would ask that you, if you could type those in to the chat box, we can respond that way. It just seems a little cleaner. We are also, I think we're having a little technical difficulty here. So if you have a question and you can't type it in, please email me, and we will respond to all emails by, depending on the quantity. We should be able to get to all of the questions by the end of the day today. So if there's any questions that you have right now, if you type those into the chat box, we can look at those and respond. And I'll just give that a minute or so. If anybody is attending the upcoming SHOT Show, Orchid Advisors and Epicor will be there. I believe our booth is 1007. So we will be at that event. Please come by and meet us. Any questions or comments or like to see any product, we will be there with that. So I'm not seeing any questions. So Alexis, that typically means you did an awesome job. Explained everything very well. So for Epicor, I'd like to thank you, Orchid Advisors, for participating in this. I'd like to thank all those that have attended. On that, we do have a question. Can you read that, Alexis, or do I need to?
Can you read it? I can't see it right now.
Yep, absolutely. In regards to multiple sales of long guns, which long guns are included in this, and does it require for regular transactions or private party?
So reporting of multiple long gun sales is strictly applicable to what are considered border states. So unless you are in Texas, California, Arizona, those border states, then you are not required to report multiple long gun sales. If you are in one of those states, again, it's all transfers to non-licensees. So anyone who does not have an FFL, including facilitation of private party transfers, but also including any sort of regular over-the-counter sale you may do. And it's any long gun with a caliber greater than 22, including 5.56, with a detachable magazine. So all of those must be reported as multiple sales on the associated ATF form, 3310.12.
And I'll give it just a second if any other questions. Quick question, does the E4473 form used by FFLCM support digital signatures? Alexis, I'll let you answer that. I actually know the answer to that one, but we'll just keep it consistent and have you answer questions.
Sure, it absolutely does. It's fantastic. It supports not only the digital signature for Section A, but C and D as well. So whether it's for your customers, your customer needing to recertify, or your employees as they complete Section D, it does support it all.
And on multiple formats. So if it's on a device that you can actually sign the device, iPad, it will work on that. Or if it's on a laptop, desktop, there are devices, signature capture devices, little pads that you can sign that is also supported. Well, we'll wrap this up. We're trying to keep it. We're trying to keep this under 30 minutes. We're right there. Again, on behalf of Epicor, Alexis, thank you. Thanks to Orchid Advisors and Phil and in spirit with us. I know he's there. And again, any questions, please shoot those to me, and we'll respond by the end of the day. If you're at SHOT Show, Epicor and Orchid will be in booth 1007. I believe that's right. And thank you for your time today and in viewing this webinar. Look forward to seeing you and talking to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.